Welcome back to the second half of the Young Voices program. This is another film from Ruby and Naomi, who unfortunately have actually dashed off because they're doing some filming at the moment, and probably maybe it was a good thing that we put this on after afternoon tea. Now, I'm thinking down, and I know that there's a slow introduction. It goes a little bit dark, and then we should be all okay.
A weekday vegetarian is eating nothing with a face Monday to Friday. Weekend, your choice. By becoming a weekday vegetarian, you're not saying goodbye to your last hamburger, but you are cutting your meat intake by 70%.
Here we go, cool. So I'd just like to introduce Ingie Johnson. Ingie was a student at Kea Valley College, which is an Enviro school, and we spent quite a bit of time with Ingie. She's an amazing young lady, and so I'll leave her to tell you the rest of her story. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. First off, I'd just like to say thank you to Nathan and to the rest of SCAN for organising such a fantastic event. When I got word of it, it blew me away actually how how inspired and how proactive that SCAN was about organising this and about getting such a dialogue of different voices to address climate change. So thank you guys. My name's Ingie. I'm 19 now and second year at Otago University. So my sort of involvement with environmental issues started through the awesome work of Enviro schools, coming into Kea Valley, talking about environmental issues, and it really started to get me thinking. And through working with them, they host wonderful huis. They really sort of get students to get educated first off about environmental issues and then really proactive and inspired to actually do actions from that. And then that early work with Enviro schools led me on to future things, like with the Sir Peter Blake Enviro Leader Forum, and which led me to go to Rio Plus 20 back in 2012 as one of 4 youth delegates. And so that was a fantastic experience and was really a chance to see hands-on what the kind of local level actions and environmental awareness translates to on a global scale, and those kind of dialogues that happen up there. And since being back, I've worked with the New Zealand Association for Environmental Educators, trying to act as sort of a bridge between students and teachers and sort of work like that. And now I'm studying environmental management, economics and law at Otago. So I guess the main thing about climate change that I believe is that it's not a yes or a no thing. It's not happening or it's not happening. It's a scale, and it's a scale that's happening now. And I think the most important thing is realising that adaptation now does equal mitigation in the future. So the little changes we do now that help us to have a more sustainable lifestyle translate to reducing what the climate change effects is going to be before we know exactly what they're going to be. Because I feel like a lot of people, if there's a little bit of uncertainty about how bad climate change is going to be, they say, well, we can't adapt or anything, but we need to adapt before we know how exactly bad it is going to be, because we know it's going to be bad, but we can still do something to stop it being so bad. And so I guess things like that is we just need to increase our resilience. So that means adapting our lifestyles now so that it's not a massive shock, say if we run out of oil or something sudden like that happens. So that's like using car less, cooking meals from home, doing what we think we'll have to do in the future, doing that today. And so I guess that kind of leads me on to the next thing, and something that's quite pertinent to talking with you guys today, SCAN. And that's the myth that climate change only affects the future generations. I believe that's completely wrong. Climate change affects everyone, and we can see that now. We only need to look to the South Dunedin floods that happened and the erratic weather patterns that we can't predict and that haven't happened. 1 in a 100-year floods have become common. So I think just straight off, climate change isn't something that's going to happen in the future or that will only affect my generation. It affects everyone, and it's affecting us now. And I also feel that there has been a separatist dialogue between older generations and younger generations. And I think this is actually one of the most harmful things in trying to think about solutions to climate change, because it's a big time waster, always blaming or thinking what we should have done, what we could have done, or thinking that, oh, well, it's already happening. It's just time wasting. So I think that's one of the biggest myths that, we need to work on in terms of climate change solutions. And it also leads to a feeling of hopelessness, both if you're older and thinking, well, the younger generation can't, there's not much that we can do now. We'll just have to leave them to sort it themselves, or the younger generation thinking that, well, other people have, made it worse for us, so there's nothing we can do now. And that leads to blame. And basically that's the dangerous cycle of, that results in not much actual positive action happening on climate change. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that we're all in this together, and without all generations being on board to tackle climate change, that we're not going to reach an effective solution. So I guess that comes to what is the main topic of what I'm going to talk about, is just, what my idea is of the solution to climate change, or how we're going to get there. And that is mixing the resilient life strategies of all generations together. So that's learning from the best bits of all the things. So that means from the older generations, we're using that use all mentality, the making things to last mentality, the self-sufficiency mentality, growing your own vegetables, how to do that. Those are the kind of lessons that we can learn from the older generations. And then from younger generations, we've got technology, we've got, passion, drive for the future. And so I think the best climate change solutions and things come from when you're using all the aspects of the best bits of the knowledge of all generations like that. And so it can sound a bit loose, so you need to know how it works in practice. So I'm just going to talk about a few examples of how it can work. So obviously with the New Zealand Association for Environmental Educators, it was mostly a teachers-orientated thing, so that was lecturers and high school teachers, primary school teachers, and actually involving the students, and that was quite it was quite new, and being able to present what students are learning actually helped everyone get better at environmental education, because it taught lessons of how are we communicating, and the students taught the teachers what they were interested in and how they wanted to be taught. And it was actually, it resulted in really good dialogues that had a lot for everyone that came to them. And also with Enviro Schools, when I was at high school at Kea Valley College, we organised a No Power Day. And so that was at the start of trying to organise it. Everyone was sort of like, doomsday, we're not going to have any power, we're going back to the Stone Age, and had a big freak out basically. And we used it as a chance to just be like, well, it's going to be one day without power, just challenge yourself to adapt, challenge yourself to try new things and think about how we did it before we had power. And so everyone was thinking it was going to be a doomsday before it actually happened, and people were like, oh, actually, I didn't need all those lights, or, used candles and fun and inventive new ways of teaching and learning. And so it was a real example of, actually, we haven't always done things this way, and how did we used to do them are sometimes things that we used to do better than they are today. So learning from that. And so that leads me on to my current project, what I'm working on, because I think that this generational dialogue is just so important. We've got so many good aspects of you know, humankind, and we just need to get the best bits in coming together for climate change. So I'm currently working on developing an app, which is, you know, what you use on smartphones and things. And it came out because in sitting in environmental management at Otago Uni, there was a study that we got talked about, which is from Canada, and it said that 70% of people actually really cared about the environment. And so at the start, all our students were like, cool, that's really great, you know, like that was really inspiring to see. But then it was like only about sort of 5% actually knew that how to do positive things or how they could change their lifestyles. And as well, the biggest thing for people not acting was actually hopelessness. They felt like they were alone, that their one action has no impact because no one else is doing it. They don't see their neighbours, their friends doing it. And so this app project is really working on linking people, linking the actions most people do every day. So you build you know, a real support network of actually doing good things for the environment. So whether it's using reusable bags or planting community gardens, doing all things like that, just seeing that our cities and our communities are actually really active and aware and helping encourage people, everyday people who might not think they can do much, to actually just start trying things, and then just like a bandwagon effect, hopefully that will take off. And so, yeah, I think that will really start to change people feeling isolated in their environmental actions and linking in events and taking the big passion that humankind actually does have for caring for the environment and actually translating it into actual action. And so just to tie up, I will be leaving my email address with Nathan, and just I'd love to hear from you if you have your own thoughts and suggestions about how you do things and how we used to do things even, you know, that you think we should be doing now, because I'd love to take that information and help translate it into the app so that everyone can just be able to look at the app and just see what actions can I do, and that will be the mixing of knowledge from all generations in that. So, yeah, I think that's everything I had to say. Cool, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ingie. That was very inspiring. Thank you very much for that. It's great to see these young people coming through from when we knew them as year 10s, year 9s at high school, and then see them still coming through with that. That's lovely, very inspiring. I'd like to introduce Siana, and just to say I've only just recently met Siana, but I was at a university climate change lecture, and sitting there, and there was a lecture, I can't even remember exactly what was being said, but it was definitely about climate change, and I think it was the Australian Climate Council, wasn't it? Yes. And there was questions at the end, and there was a question from the floor, and Siana asked this very pertinent question, and I just went, oh my God, that's an amazing thing. What a great thing for some young person to ask. So I found out who she was, and when we found out that this was happening, I thought this is a perfect person to come and talk to you guys. So welcome, Siana.
Thank you so much, Jenny. It's lovely to be here, and may I say what an absolute privilege it is to have so many mature, seasoned faces in the room. It's really refreshing, actually. I was born in Kenya, and my family travelled around quite a lot, and consequently I didn't get to spend enough time with my grandparents as I really would have liked. So I kind of feel like I've missed out on this great bastion of knowledge from the older generation. So it's so nice to be here and, you know, have a bit more exchange. Who has grandchildren in the audience? A few people? Oh, lucky you. That's excellent. Anyway, yeah, the sheer volume of collective experience and stories and consciousness in the room is pretty exciting. So it's really nice to be here. I suppose I'd better say a little bit about my involvement in climate change. At the moment, I'm studying science communication as a master's degree, hence the little title up there. But from an early age, I was really concerned about the global trends that I was seeing, just in my own observations. So like a wee patch of rainforest at the Bonavare Road in Singapore was completely clear-cut for development. A 4-hour drive that we used to do through rainforest in Malaysia but quickly became palm plantations, and I was constantly finding plastic bags on the reef when I was snorkeling. So it was obvious to me, even from a young age, that we were fast converting these beautiful wild natural areas into man-made spaces and man-made commodities. And these observations had quite a dramatic effect on me, and I saw that even all of our stuff was just making its way into all of the habitats on Earth, and that scared me quite a little bit. So when I was older and I started to hear about climate change, it actually made a lot of sense. Humankind had affected the land, we'd affected the ocean. The only natural progression would be to affect all of the air that's surrounding us as well, which is pretty big achievement. So one of the things about climate change for me is that it really unites us with every single other form of life on this planet. So every other bacteria, every other plant, animal, fungus, we're all in this together, and we're all going to be affected by this problem. So it's actually quite unifying, and it's a good chance for us to remember that this is an evolutionary family. Like, just by extending your thinking, we're actually all one big family that stemmed from a common ancestor. So yes, climate change, it's a huge challenge, but the good thing is we're not alone in facing it. And I think the more that we try to remember that we are this big evolutionary family, the easier we're going to find it to cooperate with other people and the natural world and spread that empathy. So anyway, learning about climate change, I found it teaches you an incredible amount about our society and the physical world that we live in. The more I learn about climate change, the more I really feel like it totally encapsulates humanity's problems. Like it's a symptom of a very, very flawed system that we've got. If we were to truly take action on climate change, we'd basically have to fully account and acknowledge for all the inequalities present in our global society. So we've got to address climate change at its root causes, not just looking at the impacts the fossil fuels are having on the atmosphere. We need to trace this back to what's actually really going on a global scale. And I believe that climate change is primarily a story of inequality, and inequality affects climate change in heaps of ways. So there's inequality between people who contribute to climate change, for instance, industrialised Western nations like us, and those people that are going to suffer the worst effects, so like our Pacific neighbours who stand to lose their homes. There's also inequality between those of us who are here now and have the ability to act on climate change, and those of us that are going to be here in the future that aren't going to have as much ability to act on climate change but still need to deal with its effects. There's also inequality between people who can speak up for themselves and those of us who can't. So, for instance, all the animals and plants in a forest ecosystem, for example, might be sacrificed just because someone stood up and made a really good business case for a coal mine. So our system as it stands creates this imbalance of wealth and an imbalance of power, and that, I think, is what causes a lot of social crises and a lot of social and environmental crises. So it's power inequality that allows companies to go into communities, to drill their oceans and land for oil, to pay off local authorities to dump toxic waste into their water supply, and to bribe governments to exploit their fish stocks. All of these things stem from an inequality of power. So inequality is actually required for our social system to function as it currently is. So the only way we can keep all of this wonderful consumerism flowing is if people are actually exploited to make those mass-produced commodities. So dealing with climate change is actually a fantastic opportunity for us to completely restructure our socio-economic system. So this, I know, I'm excited too. This does seem like a really daunting task. I'm not going to lie, it does seem daunting, but I also think it's very encouraging because it means in trying to tackle climate change, we're actually having to address and deconstruct all of those same power structures that reinforce racism, sexism, and classism. And those are the things that I think have been holding humanity back in the past. And hopefully, we're going to be the ones to completely change that. So this is why there's also been so much pushback, I think, against action on climate change. The system really doesn't want to change. It's very resistant to all attempts to change it. because we have to acknowledge that we're challenging some really deeply entrenched social norms. And that's always going to be difficult, but it's exciting too. What's cool, I think, is that climate change, this movement is aligned with so many other movements across the world, so many movements for social justice, environmental justice, animal rights. All of these things are really tightly interwoven and interconnected. And it means that this movement is really big. It's really big and it's really strong. And I don't think we're going to realise just how strong it is until we win. And then we'll be like, good. This was a lot more impressive than we first thought. So realising the interconnectivity between so many of these issues was quite a turnaround for me in my thinking. It made me realise that mitigating climate change was going to take a lot more than just changing our light bulbs or changing the kind of car we drive. It means that we're going to have to address inequality and fundamentally rethink how and why and by what mechanisms all of our resources are distributed around the world. It's going to take a big rethink. And I mean, the truth is that most people want a clean, healthy environment. Most people want, to keep nature pristine. And that's at odds with our current lifestyle. And I think the problem is that people are disempowered by their position in this social structure. And there's also all of these habits that have been imposed on us by growing up in a consumerist society. So I don't think we should blame ourselves, because that, as some other speakers have said, that doesn't really help. But the encouraging thing is that when we've got this great big pyramid of inequality, so there's some dazzly people up here and a lot of people down here, the base is so much bigger than the top, which means that we're bigger, we're stronger. There are more of us that want change than that don't want change. So that's pretty encouraging. Now, next part. What do we do about all of this? Well, for me, figuring out a strategy about how to combat these issues, it's as much about conscious unlearning as it is about learning. I think we've got to acknowledge that we've grown up in a system that has really affected our thinking from day one. So there's lots of metaphors that are kind of quite pervasive in our society, and it takes a bit of effort to actually get out of those thinking habits. So, for example, the concept of time is money. Time is not money, and I don't know who came up with that. And this idea that we have to constantly earn money, that we have to accumulate capital, accumulate commodities, or produce products in order to be a valued member of society. All of these things have really contributed to the demise of the environment. Another strong metaphor that's pervasive in our society is this notion of competition, that we have to try and win, that we have to try and get ahead, that we should be constantly competing with our peers for promotions, for a better car, for a bigger house, for more exotic holidays. I mean, we're all humans. We should all be on the same team. We shouldn't be competing with each other all the time. And so I really don't know where all this jealousy and competitiveness came from. It's not very constructive at all. There we go. I'm going to skip out one of my slides because it's not very relevant. So this is what I think we need to do in a very abstract diagram. I think we need to challenge and reassess many aspects of our modern life. We need to remove the blinkers that the system has imposed on us. And I think we need to ask ourselves what's important, not just what we've been told is important. So fundamentally, I think we need a paradigm shift. And we have to shift from an individualistic way of thinking to an inclusive, holistic, community-driven way of thinking, where we recognise that we don't exist in isolation, and that we recognise that we're part of a collective evolutionary intelligence. So it's difficult because in Western society, the focus is very much on the individual, and we're encouraged to live in our houses, to wall ourselves off from other people, to wall ourselves off from our community. And I think we have to think about this paradigm in the climate change movement as well, because often some of the rhetoric is, what can you do as an individual to combat climate change? And I mean, that's just terrifying. Climate change is way too big of an issue for any one person to take it upon themselves. So we need to think about what can we do as a community to combat this problem. And I think putting the guilt on the individual is just not particularly helpful. So as you can see from the diagram up here, in the science communication course I'm doing at the moment, a big part of it is about democratising access to knowledge. So inequality of access to information and inequality of access to education and knowledge, I think that's one of the big things that keeps people from being able to act on environmental and social problems. So part of what we want to do is take it from, say, this figure over here, where you've got differing sizes, so you've got inequality and everyone's individualised, everyone's got their knowledge and their skills that they're keeping to themselves, and they're thinking about themselves, and like the individual realm. We need to move more to what collectively do we know, and how can we share skills and share knowledge so that we can combat these problems. So by opening up these communication channels and giving people the knowledge and the tools to solve problems, we can actually give people agency to combat this social and environmental injustice. So sharing and co-creating knowledge, I think, is going to be one of the key ways that we solve problems like climate change. And we should really be challenging any power structures that only grant elite access to information. So yes, University of Otago, I am thinking about you a little bit, because even the university structures, that's a way of housing knowledge, and that's kind of an elite institution. So we need to just think about these things and question them. So I think if we shared everything, we'd need a lot less stuff. If we weren't working constantly to produce and buy stuff, we'd have a lot more time for our families. So we shouldn't have to wait until we're retired to do the things that really matter. We can change that reality, we can challenge that reality, and we can create a new one. So climate change requires us to rethink our lifestyles. And to be honest, thank goodness, because all of this stuff, all of these commodities, cars, big buildings, all of it just stresses me out anyway. So I'm so glad we're going to be able to do away with all that and come up with something more exciting. And what gives me hope is basically that we can change the way we think, and we can change the way we feel. So I've got another slide up here. That is from down in Fiordland on the Hump Ridge track, and it was an absolutely beautiful bit of forest that I just had to capture in full high definition. So if we look at this slide up there, new research has shown that exposing people to natural scenes makes us more likely to engage in cooperative behaviour than if people were exposed to an urban scene. They would be more likely to engage in self-interested and competitive behaviour. I thought that was really interesting when you think about the fact that most of us live in cities, most of us live in towns. Maybe this is really adding and reinforcing the way that we compete with each other and just think of ourselves as individuals. When we're out in nature, apparently, that's a lot less pervasive, and we actually cooperate far more, which is great. Now we know this, greening urban spaces, all of those projects, we know that we're actually going to contribute to changing the way we think and cooperating more. So our behaviour is fundamentally affected by who and what surrounds us. And just as a little aside, I think we should write to Paris and ask that the UN climate talks be conducted in a lovely forest glade so that governments of the world feel a little bit more open to cooperating with each other when they're trying to take on this big problem. We might actually get some real action then. But to be honest, I'm not sure if the answer lies with government action. I think it lies on us and people who get together because we want to learn and we want to exchange ideas. I think that's where the real hope lies, to be honest. It's from the bottom up. So social change can be really exponential, and it's awesome that we've started up these conversations. I just want to say I really hope everyone owns their viewpoints, so don't be shy of being political. I know in New Zealand I've noticed that some of these political conversations, people don't want to be rude, people don't want to have arguments with their friends, but own it, because if you feel strongly about society and about the environment, then your views are inherently political, and that's okay. So climate change, not climate change, sorry, just change in general, societal change, is going to start happening if we start talking to each other and getting excited about the alternative future that we can create. So things like this that you guys have organised, you guys just wanting to learn more, that's fantastic. That kind of communication really gives me hope. And returning to a community means that as Ingy said, there's going to be a lot more of this dialogue between generations because that's so useful. We learn so much from each other. And this is the kind of thing that's going to get us through. So just make sure that everything you learn just gets spread as far and as wide as possible. And don't be afraid to challenge other viewpoints or to have your own viewpoints challenged. That's okay, that's awesome. That's part of a healthy democracy. And you really will be amazed at how quickly good ideas can just take hold. So I'm involved in Oil-Free Otago with Nathan, but there are so many other groups and there are so many other community projects that are going on where people are getting together and talking about this stuff and doing things all the time. As I'm sure you're all aware, because you're all here, we never ever stop learning. So combating climate change is going to require cooperation and empathy for all other human beings. It's also going to require that we work towards infinite goals. And the kind of harmonious society that we really want to create, it might not even happen in my lifetime, and it might not happen in yours. But that doesn't matter. I think we need to think about this on a bigger scale. So as a global family, we are going to get there, and it's just a question of when. So I think really striving and working towards these things with the full notion that we might not achieve it, tomorrow or next week. I think that's really important to keep up all of our energy. And I strongly encourage you guys to keep doing what you're doing, talk to your neighbours and participate as a community in making change happen. It's really exciting, and I thank you all so much for having me. It's been an absolute privilege and I've really enjoyed it.
We're not going to that. Thank you, Sienna. I told you she was amazing. So I'd just like to introduce Letitia and Pael. Letitia I know from Generation Zero, and she'll no doubt talk about perhaps a little bit about what that is. And Pael, I just met Pael again just a week or so ago. Again, just really inspiring, amazing young people, and I think it's great that they have the opportunity to talk to you. So welcome.
Kia ora everyone, thanks for having us. We're just going to run through our slideshow, and we've purposely put quite a lot of images on it because a lot of text on the slide sometimes gets a bit tiring to read, but we're just going to tell you a bit about our journey through working on climate change, and Paya's going to go first and then we're going to go second, and we'll finish off together.
We also made this presentation for primary and secondary school aged kids because we didn't know who it was for, but I think it adapts really, really nicely. So I'm really excited about this. I'm just so excited I'm so excited. So hi, I'm Pael, and this is me. This is me on Takapuna Beach in April. Despite the prettiness of this photo, it's actually 11 degrees. It's really cold. I don't have a wetsuit. I'm an ocean swimmer, and this summer I want to try swim 100 kilometres. I don't know if I can do that, but anyway, that's me. Yeah, and a little bit about me. I'm born in Wellington. I went to Brooklyn School in Wellington from year 1 to year 8, and then I went to Wellington Girls College, and then I did swimming. I was a competitive swimmer. I'm short and fat. I was never going to make it to the Olympics. That's okay. I failed, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed, and I kept failing, and I kept going. I don't even know why, but I loved it, so that didn't matter. I also did surf lifesaving, and I'm also Indian, and I'm short and I'm fat and I'm a girl, so that was hard, but that's okay. I learnt a lot from that too. And yeah, I don't know, I guess you could kind of look at me as the ultimate failure, but I'm really happy with who I am. I'm really happy with the way I live my life. I just love how much I fail, because every time I fail, I keep learning, and it's awesome. Being brave, oh my gosh, I'm so people-phobic, and I'm so scared of just about everything I do. That photo with the chicken suit, that's when I was younger. I was really interested in animal rights and things like that, as lots of younger people are. And yeah, I ran 10Ks in a chicken suit. I hate running, by the way, and it was like a sauna suit. It was ridiculous. The other one, I'm scared of heights. I'm ridiculously scared of heights. Like, if I stood on a chair, I'd probably be scared. But I'm right on the side. I'm somewhere there on one of the lower ones, and I'm really scared. But I got up there and I learned how to sail the ship in Spirit of Adventure. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my past. What do I do now? Oh, climate change. So climate change, yeah, it's this really big thing, and you kind of think like, oh, climate change, too big, what can I do? Well, I like this picture because you can see me, and literally I'm just like, what the F word? How am I going to make it to the top? And I'm just like, that's a look on my face on the other side. And I think the thing with climate change and with so many of the problems and issues we have in the world, all you have to do is take one step and then another, and then another, and another, and another. I got to the top. I was pretty happy. I took a photo. Don't have the photo in here, but I got there. I was really happy, but you needed to take that first step, and we can all take that first step. It's awesome. We just got to do it. Yeah. So what do I do now? My current official role, I do a lot more than my role, but my role is I'm the welfare officer at OUSA, and this is my dream job. I get paid to help people and help things, and not only that, with welfare, I don't have to just focus on disability or queer issues or climate change or any problem. I can focus on all of them. It's so awesome. Just before I was working on sexual violence issues this morning, I met up about health and how to improve health for students, and now I'm here doing this. It's just, I have the best job in the world. I love it so much. And yeah, Sustainability Week was then. Yeah, wow, was it really that long ago? What? How was it? Time was weird. But yeah, that was this year. And Better Bag It, that's a cool campaign I did. And so pretty much I like to get people to adopt healthy habits, and I like to bribe them to do this. So not only did I give away these eco bags for people to use, when people use them, they can win supermarket vouchers. It's great. So all I want to do is get them to adopt the habit of using their bags, and they'll get a prize. But the prize isn't going to be around forever, but the habit that they learn of taking their bags to the supermarket is. And so I think of ways that I can do things like that. With my role, I kind of I guess what I work on in my life, and I kind of think of this as like kind of like public welfare. How do I like make things better for people? And I also like sometimes use the term systemic advocate. So I work with systems. I work in the systems, and like I kind of think about like, okay, so this isn't working. That's cool. What can I do with the system to make it work? And then I also think, hey, what do I want it to be like? And that's what I do. And then when was I? No. Yeah. Letitia's turn. Yay!
Cool. Kia ora, everyone. So, a little bit about me. I grew up in coastal rural New Zealand in the North Island, and I grew up went to school 15 minutes from the New Zealand oil refinery, so climate change is a pretty close to home subject, more so than I actually ever thought, because it took until university, so about 15 years later, for me to figure out what climate change actually was. And I learned it from the environmental side of things, so how it affects species, sea level rise, glaciers, and all of that kind of thing. And I joined Generation Zero 3 years ago now, I think, which is a youth climate organisation focused on getting New Zealand to net zero carbon by 2050. And we work in the political advocacy sphere. We're a non-partisan group. And that group helped me really to see the social equity, health, basically everything else that's not strictly environmental helped us to see all of the other sides of it. So that's really been where I came to this. And this picture is actually a trip 12 of us made from Dunedin to Auckland, and we cycled to the Youth Climate Summit, Power Shift, in 2012. And this image sort of represents the issues I see with climate change, or one of them that I wanted to talk about, and that was burnout. And that's the fact that individuals are working on this tirelessly, weeks on, it doesn't end. It's just such an omnipresent issue, you can't really get away from it. And as young people, we're dealing with this for the rest of our lives, and it's frightening. It's so frightening. And a lot of me and my friends end up crying when we start talking about this, so apologies in advance. But you do fall off the bike physically and mentally, and really that's a really big threat. And so when we are talking about what you can do, so you have to sort of take yourself, so there's the personal journey that you go on with in terms of solving climate change, and then there's matching that action with actual tangible actions where you can decrease emissions or influence some kind of decision. So after I fell off my bike, I got back on it, and so we were cycling to Power Shift, and this was my crew. I actually then went to Flat with these great people, and I'll show you in the next slide what that happened with that one. But we did a lot of crazy stuff, and this was in Gen Zero, so we also did a lot of stunts, and one of the ones that we did locally was the good news and the bad news about climate change. So it's nice to see both sides of the issue. You hear a lot of doom and gloom, it's going to be really terrible, but there's some cool sides of it as well, as in like what happens when political action is a thing and political will, what happens when people get together and do some cool stuff, plus all the innovation that goes alongside that. So we made good news, bad news TV, and that is me in the middle of the television. So in terms of once I got back on the bike, I really needed support and friends and people with similar values to myself. So I had that support network. And then the actions that we took, we could do just about anything. So these are my friends in this top picture in Wellington, and they were exposing the transport funding inequality, I guess. So there's lots more funding going to roads as opposed to public transport. So they're in their underwear on the government lawn telling people about transport. And so that was a bit fun. I didn't actually do that. It's a bit too cold here to only in the North Island can you do things like that. But we also got together and we worked on a house locally. Dunedin's voted worst flat in 2012, and it was a shocker. So what we did was we worked alongside our landlord to improve the house in terms of energy efficiency. We tried to make it net carbon zero, which was really tricky. But we ended up, it took 2 years, and we ended up with solar panels, insulation, and it's still standing amazingly, because we found this picture is of when we tried to do some wall insulation, and there was a giant hole in the wall from mould that had just been covered up. No foundation on that side of the house, and it was built in around the 1900s, so good building ship, but need a little bit more. But anyway, housing was one of the other issues I've become really passionate about, because it does also contribute to carbon emissions in New Zealand, and it's really easy win in terms of reducing emissions and improving public health outcomes. So it's one of those win-win things, similar with transport. And so this is where we come back together. And so really we wanted to say, in terms of what actions do we think can be taken in terms of climate change, it's basically collective action. So pick an issue or a skill that you have, a passion that you have, find your friends and get together and then do something about it with a climate change flavour. This slide is just saying this is some cool stuff that can happen. So the Dunedin City Council chose to divest from fossil fuels, and there was a lot of public pressure for that. Generation Zero submitted, lots of other organisations submitted as well. Yeah, and if you're in a decision-making position or you have some power, like Leonardo DiCaprio, our favourite Jack in the corner, using your influence to help other people make similar decisions is a really cool way of doing that if you're not particularly fond of working with other people. That's fine, it's not for everyone. And then, of course, you have Naomi Klein, so she's talking about the systemic issues that Senna was talking about, and she's just about to release a film, so that's another way you can educate yourself and do something kind of fun like watch a film. The one on the far end is the recent climate change consultation we had on the national targets, which some of you may have gone along to. It was a bit depressing, the outcome that the government took from that, but why I think it's cool is we had a lot of people in that auditorium compared to many other public talks we have of a similar nature, of a similar style in terms of consultation. There was a lot of people there, a lot of really passionate people there that really wanted New Zealand to do something cool, and that's a really powerful message for our decision makers.
Cool. I'm just going to interrupt and say one other thing that I think is especially relevant maybe for you guys, an approach that I use in my life, because as you can see, I'm pretty positive. Not only that, I'm really aware of all of these issues, and I'm pretty clued up, and I keep on educating myself. And, you know, a few years ago, I used to get really down, and sometimes I still do get really down about these things, but I let myself feel that way, and I think about the Jane Goodall approach. And the Jane Goodall approach to me is she just goes out there, she knows exactly what is wrong, she knows everything that is wrong, and she keeps being positive, and she keeps going. She's amazing. And so I always think about the Jane Goodall approach. I don't even know if this is a real thing, but I just always think when I'm feeling really sad and down, like I can't do anything, like together everything that we're doing isn't helping, I just think, it's okay, Jane Goodall approach. I know what's happening and I'm doing the best I can.
And so this is just our last image, and it really just surmises what we've all collectively been talking about today, and that's basically collective action. Climate change is a problem created by many people, and it will be solved by many more people. And this was the People's Climate March in New York City, and it had 400,000 people, which is roughly the size of population of the South Island, I think. I might be a bit wrong on that. A lot of people coming together, and they're all solving this problem in different ways, different flavours, different styles, different skills, and different interests, but we can come together and build this future that we really want. Thank you.
Thank you so much.